Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another wonderful, delightful episode of Man Buns and Jesus. I'm one of your hosts, Josh Laborious. I'm a pastor out in Southern California. And over there, introducing the topic that I'm still not entirely sure is a good idea. Pastor Ben Olschlager, the esteemed Reverend from Lake Orion, Michigan. What are we jumping into today, Ben?
That was way too much of an introduction for me, but
What, the esteemed part or the reverend part?
one of those is a title that I can legally put on my name now. So the other one.
I don't know.
Anyway.
With how hot it's been lately, you could be steaming.
That's fair. That's fair. It has been
That's
quite
not
as
what
hot here in
esteemed
Michigan.
means. No, for any of you studying for your SATs out there, that's not what esteemed means. And if I'm telling you that, maybe you're not ready to take your SAT.
Anyway, so 2 weeks ago on the podcast, as you're listening to this, a week ago as we're recording this, we had our mentor and professor, Dr. Joel Bierman, on the podcast to talk about the two realms, this idea of us as Christians living as citizens both in the kingdom of God and in the civil realm, and how that creates some interesting dynamics in the way that we have to approach life. And we kind of danced around some things in the midst of that podcast, a lot of them political, a lot of them ideological. And so today we're just firing off hot takes. And by firing off hot takes, I mean, our plan today is basically point out from our perspectives everything that we can possibly within the next half hour, 45 minutes, see wrong about either the political party of the Republicans or the Democrats. And we're going to try and give equal time to both, because I think I can say this fairly for both of us. We genuinely dislike them both relatively equally.
I consider myself thoroughly apathetic. I don't dislike either party. I dislike some individuals in either party, but I just don't care.
Anyway, neither one of these
we're going to spend the next hour talking about things that you're really not supposed to talk about with other people. So
yep,
buckle up, folks.
If you don't like sitting at your Thanksgiving table with the people in your life who like talking politics, you're really going to hate this podcast.
You should listen to it anyway, though. I think it'll be worthwhile.
Yeah. All right. Josh, do we want to do this by topic, or do we want to do this by party? I think we do this by topic.
I think we should, but I think it would be fair for us to, how do I say this? Give some background of where we're coming from as individuals.
Okay, that's fair.
So what I will share with everybody, like I said, currently as it stands, I'm very apathetic toward both political parties. I can understand why a faithful Christian would align either way. With that being said, right, I was raised in a very conservative household, right? During undergrad, I listened to a lot of Ben Shapiro. I don't really listen to him anymore, but I still actually have a lot of respect for him. I think he has a lot of intellectual integrity in how he approaches things. So, like, I am coming from a more right-wing background. That's not like I said, and I'm going to keep saying, I don't really subscribe to either party today. But if I have a preference or a soft spot or a leaning, it's gonna be for the conservative side of things. Ghost agrees with me. If you heard that, that's my dog in the background being a dork. That
I
was
think
that fair? Can I still be a pastor to everyone in my congregation? Having said that,
I think so. Yeah.
I hope so.
So, I'm gonna come out a little spicier here. Um, I have a genuine dislike for both of the major political parties in the United States. And here's why. I grew up like Josh, fairly conservative. We had to take a like a questionnaire thing in my high school civics class, and I was the most right-leaning guy in said class. And then, like,
What happened to you?
I don't know things. College,
Things and stuff. Ah, college. That's how they get you.
like my views are very much the same. The way that I approach them is very different. I think that for the most part, both political parties have fallen into the like consumerist, individualist, very like relativist approach to society and ideology that America loves to trumpet. And so there are a handful of individuals within each party that I like, and that I would vote for without too much hesitation. But I have to do a lot of reckoning and prayerful angst, wrestling every time that I go to the ballot box, because I don't know. I really don't like the state of modern politics in the United States. At this point, I consider myself relatively centrist, holding a lot of still relatively conservative views, but not approaching them very often remotely in the same direction as the more conservative of the two major parties, if that makes sense.
I think so. I think it makes sense. So, kind of with now, you guys know the bias, I guess, we're approaching this from. I think kind of a fair catch-all way to describe us is we're disillusioned conservatives. Is that
That's a great way to put it, Josh.
And more foundationally than that, I think I can speak for both of us. We aren't approaching things with any sort of party loyalty. We're approaching things from a perspective of what is faithful and how can I best serve that, support that.
Yeah.
Because that is truly what matters, right? It is not the political party. It is not the affiliation, whatever that might be. It is what is more faithful. And that is what our concern is. And I genuinely believe that is how, as Christians, we should approach things. And we talked about that a couple weeks ago with Dr. Bierman. Like, stop thinking about things as an American or as a Republican or as a Democrat or as any of these other worldly titles. Think about things first and foremost as a Christian. And after that, you can take you can think about like other things after you consider things as a Christian, right? If two things are equal as Christians, or as from a Christian perspective, then I don't care how you make your decision. I probably care for some decisions, but like if you're at a restaurant and you're choosing between a chicken sandwich and a burger, from a Christian perspective, right? There is not a difference there. So if you want to flip a coin, go for it. If you want to make if you want to make your decision based on a health thing or a diet thing or whatever one has more avocado on, like, I don't care how you make your decision, as long as the first and foremost consideration is the faith.
Yep.
So with that being said, let's
One more
jump into
disclaimer. One more disclaimer.
doing
There
like 20
are
minutes of disclaimers.
Yes, I know. There are going to be issues where I think both like the Democrats and the Republicans could feasibly create a Christian argument for their approach. It might hurt your head to hear that, but I think there are plenty of places where that's true. I don't know if we're going to talk about any of them today, but yeah. So no, KNOW, that as we talk about this, like, we are equal opportunity offenders and we are equal opportunity promoters, because we don't care whose party or whose idea it is, as long as we think it's faithful.
Yeah. So I think what I'm going to say outright is I think the extremes of both parties are just flat out in the wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So when I kind of picture a quintessential far right individual, right?
Let's maybe not do that.
No, I'm picturing someone who is, and maybe if you're on the right, you might disagree with this, but the popular conception is far right. You have Christian nationalists, you have groups like the KKK, you kind of have white supremacy gets lumped in with the far right, and that stuff is not faithful, right? That's not how we're called to think about or treat our neighbors. You're outright, or I think alt-right is the term they use. The alt-right, like a lot of the things they say are just to provoke arguments and create division. No, like you shouldn't be doing that, right? We should be seeking to live peaceably with one another. We should be seeking to show love and compassion and forgiveness to each other. And oddly enough, the far left, I think, falls into a lot of the same categories. It's just the groups they choose to hate are different. But they're still driven very much by aggression and division and hatred. And so I'm thinking like far left BLM. So I know like there are some moderate BL, like there's a spectrum of people who get involved with the Black Lives Matter movement. But like the very far side that's like looting things and destroying things, like we talked about this previously, that's wrong, right? Correct? You shouldn't be doing stuff like that. Or people on the far left that advocate for extreme sexual freedom. We shouldn't be doing that. Marriage is reserved for marriage. Did I say marriage is reserved for marriage? I meant sex is reserved for marriage. I need to drink more of this coffee. And marriage is between a man and one woman, right? So like on both extremes, they're making mistakes. That you're not being faithful to what God has called us to be. That's where I want to start, is like immediately the far sides of either side are off, and they're doing things they probably shouldn't be doing. They definitely shouldn't be doing.
And I think two things that are relevant to this discussion today, statistically, and I mean, just by the eye test, the extremes are becoming larger, more vocal, and more influential in politics more recently. And that's why, like, it's important for us to reckon with this more than we used to have to, because it is more of a problem than it was 15, 20, 30 years ago. Not to say it wasn't ever an issue then. Like certainly, the KKK has existed for 150, 200 years. So like, it has been a problem, but it's not like it's new, but it's also new in a different way. So as we dive into this, I'll reiterate the question because I forgot your answer. Do you want to do this by
I think we should do this by topic.
okay.
I think
All
that's
right.
a better way to approach things.
Okay. So let's start with one that's maybe less offensive. Taxation.
I was thinking the same thing.
Cool.
Okay, you ready for my spicy take?
Sure.
You might not agree with this. So first of all, I don't think you should be able to vote on anything that has to do with taxes if you are one of those people who doesn't figure out your tip because you don't understand math. If you say, "Oh, I'm not a math person," right? Like you have no place talking about taxes because you don't understand what is being done. So, my take on taxes. There should be a flat percentage tax. If we're talking about what is fair, I genuinely believe, you say take 10% off whatever. And people are like, that's not fair. That favors the wealthy. I'm like, do you have any concept of how much more 10% of $1 million is than 10% of $30,000? Right? Like, they are paying more. They're paying a lot more. But if you grade the variance, which I genuinely believe part of the reason that is done is because people don't understand how percentages work. The wealthier you are, the more the higher ratio you have to contribute at. And I don't think that's fair. So like I think the left's approach to taxation tends to be more tax the wealthy. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm not wealthy. I'm never going to be wealthy. But that doesn't strike me as fair because you could assume that maybe they got their wealth in a shady way. I choose to assume that maybe they had a good idea or they worked hard. They shouldn't be punished for that. I think they should have to pay their fair share, which is going to be more than the fair share of someone who is on a minimum wage. But I don't think we should go above and beyond to take as much as we can, which is the left's take. And then the right tends to treat them maybe more kindly than they should, with tax breaks and stuff like that. And I'm like, let's do something that's fair for everyone. And I genuinely believe if you do that, you're actually going to end up better off, because what happens when you tax wealthy people at an insane rate is these are smart people. You don't get super rich by accident. You might get rich by accident, but you don't get Elon Musk levels of rich by accident, right? They're going to find a way to hide their money. They're going to find a way to not have to pay their taxes. But if you approach it fairly, I genuinely believe you're going to have less of that going on because they're not feeling persecuted. So you're not going to have people finding loopholes in the tax system. People are just going to pay their fair share. I understand that everyone, like, there are going to be people that find loopholes, but like as it stands now, if I was suddenly wealthy, I would ask my accountant, how do I make sure I minimize my taxes? If the rate was kind of equitable across the board, I wouldn't ask that question. Well, at least theoretically. Like I said, I've never had the pressure of wealth to have to deal with. The burden of wealth, whatever. So what do you think, Ben?
I think you're a hopeless optimist. Um, so here's the
That's
thing.
not on brand for that's twice. That's 2 episodes in a row.
Yep.
What's going on here?
Yeah. Maybe we're
What's in my coffee?
redoing your brand. Um,
That's not right. I like my brand.
anyway, so looking at the way that we do taxes in the United States, like our current system tends to be uh, a balance between some sort of a straight flat tax and an extreme graduated system. I think where it's at right now is kind of the like, it's a graduated system, but it's kind of a balanced one. So it's not overly harsh on the extremely wealthy, and it's not.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't have a huge problem with how it stands now. My problem is more where each side wants to take it.
So here's the thing. I think
Okay,
that
so I just quick
adjustments.
looked up the brackets
Mhm.
if you want to. So the lowest tax rate is 10%.
Yep, and that's
Um,
up to like $40,000, something like that.
nine
Is it
thousand
higher than
nine
that?
hundred fifty dollars.
What is it?
It goes up to $9,950.
Oh yeah, yeah.
12% goes up to 40,000.
That's where I was at.
20. But if you're in the highest income bracket, it's up to 37%. That is a large percentage of your income. Um,
But at that point, you're also making enough surplus income. Like
that's
you're
true.
not getting taxed 37% on all of your income, just the part that falls in that bracket, which is part of the beauty of the American tax system, for as stupid as it is. Um,
Well, that's the other thing. I think we'd save a lot of money if we simplified the whole dang thing.
there's some truth to that. So here's my thing on taxes. I think everyone who's trying to change the tax code is just greedy. Whether it's someone trying to turn it into a flat tax, that is often driven by wealthy people wanting to be wealthier. There's a lot of greed there. If it's somebody who's maybe not as well off and is desiring a heavier taxes on the wealthy, that's not you, I don't think.
That's not me.
That's oftentimes driven by a desire to be more like those wealthy people, and so there's greed
Right, they're
there
looking
too.
for a redistribution of some sort.
Yeah, exactly. Or like that the money taken from those people then ends up somehow, you know, peripherally benefiting this person in their life. Like maybe it went to repave their roads or give them a new park or something. Which there's some biblical elements to that too, but I'm not advocating for socialism before anyone freaks out.
That's a
Basically,
separate episode. We're going to get there. Capitalism
yeah,
versus socialism. We're going to get there eventually.
yeah, that'll be another one that gets us fired. Um, basic, basically, like I think right now we're at a compromise between people who are greedy because they want the wealth of the wealthy, and people who are greedy because, as someone who is wealthy, they want more wealth. And it pisses everyone off, which means it's perfect. And like, I don't think there's a necessarily more or less fair way that you could do this, because ultimately I don't, this is maybe a personal interpretation of scripture, but like I don't think it's good for us as Christians to advocate for the wealthy to become wealthier unless we know that like those people are going to use their wealth to benefit the least of these. And so if we see a bunch of people, and especially in a society where we have a voice, if we see a bunch of people just hoarding wealth, I'm happy to say, hey, let's take some of this and put it into programs that are going to help the least of these. But then on the flip side, if we see a bunch of people who are perfectly well off, who are saying, hey, I need more money, like there's a level of greed there too, and we can say no to that. So what do we do with taxation? I think we just leave it.
I have had an idea that I think and this is not practical. I'm throwing this out there, but I know this
Okay.
will never happen. Just because we're not logistically capable of pulling something like this off.
Mhm.
But I think you take I get so this is you take the fundamental needs of society, like like very basic roads, utilities, and police, fire departments, first responders. That is covered by taxes. None of the extra stuff. No funding for grants. No funding for welfare. No, so like none of the extra stuff. Just the basic needs of society, and that is funded by taxes. And the rest, there is a system set up. Like you could just use Venmo. Use Venmo. And if you think something is important, you can put money to it. Right? So I know there was a lot of flack coming out because some bill had managed to put in a ton of money, like a federal bill had managed to put in a ton of money for some like performing arts center in California or something. Like, and I'm like, that's absurd, right? If it is so important, if people believe that it is so important to have funding for this performing arts, whatever, give them an opportunity, like just give money to it. Don't run that stuff through the government. If you believe welfare should be supported, give to your church and say, church, we need to take care of the people in our community who have fallen on rough times, right? Like that's, I mean,
this is
whole
Josh, the
separate point.
hopeless optimist, speaking again.
Right, like I prefaced all this saying like this could never work.
But I think in an idealized society, like in an idealized Christian society where neighbors cared for neighbors, churches cared for the least of these in their communities, like, would this be how we want society to operate? Absolutely. Like, if the government is literally just there for infrastructure and defense,
right? Yes.
Great. But
and frankly, I think
we live in a sinful world that's more messy than that. So
in an ideal world, if the church has done its job and Christians do their job, I think the need for programs like welfare and social security and food stamps disappear entirely.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need help from the government if your church or your neighbor is supporting you.
Mm-hmm.
If I see my neighbors having a tough time and I have the means to do so, I say, hey, let me pay for your groceries.
Sounds like we're moving on to welfare.
Is that where we want to go?
Sure. Do you want me to roll here first? So, like, the thing that we've been laying out in the last 5 minutes is very much the idealized like view of welfare systems in this country. There are a lot of people, especially on the conservative side of the political spectrum, especially within the Republican Party, who say we don't need welfare systems. There are so many nonprofits and churches that will take care of the least of these. We're fine. The truth is, in a lot of circumstances, especially in like food programs and housing programs and healthcare programs, especially with the cost of healthcare these days, like churches and nonprofits can't keep up. there was a sarcastic video made, I don't know, a few years ago. It was a College Humor video. It was one of their like CEO of, X company is giving updates on his company. He's like, the CEO is having a slow realization that GoFundMe was no longer a site to like crowdsource fund projects, but now it was just a way to pay people's medical bills. And on some level, that's like a little too true. And that the same thing happens in housing, the same thing happens in food shortages, the same thing happens in, childcare, education. There are shortages of these things all over the country, and places where the church at this point in time is just incapable of doing more because we don't have the manpower, we don't have the money in a lot of cases. And so in the interim, is it bad to advocate for the government to step into some of these roles? I don't think so, but I think we need to be careful about how we do that. And so, Josh, you want to speak to that?
Well, I think both sides deserve to get smacked a little bit on welfare.
Oh, absolutely.
But at the same time, I think both sides have a fair point. Kind of the more democratic take of like we need to support welfare programs because people need it. I think there's undoubtedly some truth to that. And I am not convinced that if you reduce tax rates to stop funding welfare, I'm not convinced that churches would see a sudden influx of giving. Right? Like if your taxes get cut in half, I don't think you're putting that money to the church.
There's Josh the pessimist.
So the reality, that's realism, bruh. Come on. And that's on
Yes,
brand.
Tech, yes.
So there is a reality that, like, if I was on the left and I'm speaking, that's Ghost has a squeaky toy. That could be regrettable. If I'm on the left, my comment is if churches and nonprofits can handle it, prove it, right? Like, kill welfare by stopping people from going into the office, not like forcibly, but like make it so they have no need to apply for welfare. So that's the one side, like kind of building up the left a little bit. But on the flip side, I think the right has some really valid points that the system gets abused. My mom, I hope I'm allowed to tell this story. So my mom worked at a pregnancy resource center when I was in high school. Like they would go into hospitals, and especially with first-time moms and single moms, they would provide resources. They'd say, like, here are parenting classes you can go to. Here are things that your kid needs. Here's like helping them out, giving, and they were providing that support. But she would talk to parents who were knowingly and very deliberately abusing welfare systems. Right? She talked to kids who were moms way before they should have been moms. And it came like if you ask them, why did you get pregnant? Their response is, oh, it was my turn to bring in the welfare checks. So like there's a reality, and the right, I think, is correct in pointing this out, that like even if churches and nonprofits were handling everything, there would still be people who would go and apply for welfare to abuse the system and to get things that they don't need or get ever like.
Can I grossly oversimplify this whole thing?
Probably. Well, hold on. Give me like 30 more seconds.
Go for it.
Because unemployment's the same thing, right? There are people who apply for jobs so they can continue to get unemployment, but they go in and they tank the interview, right? Because they don't want to work. They want to just make sure they keep getting the unemployment checks. So both sides are right in a certain lens. And I don't know what we're supposed to do about it, but yeah.
So
There's my 30 seconds, Ben.
my gross oversimplification. Republicans don't like carrots, Democrats don't like sticks.
Yeah.
Like, so the image there, the analogy being, when you're trying to capture a rabbit, there's two ways to do it, either with a carrot, something to entice them, or a stick, something to frighten them. And the best methods use both. Our current political system has a party that says let's only use sticks, and there's a political party that says let's only use carrots, and neither one of them is willing to use the other. And that's where, like, it becomes either really easy to abuse the system or really easy for the system to not actually achieve the goals that it's designed to fulfill.
Yeah. And something, this kind of touches on both of the things we've touched so far, and something that got mentioned but we haven't touched. If you're listening to this thinking and you're frustrated by it, because you think, well, with a little planning, people can take care of this stuff. And by that, I mean, unemployment helps if you lose your job suddenly. Well, the comment is, well, you should have saved up an emergency fund to make sure that if you lost your job, you would have money of your own to take care of for a while. I understand that argument. I mean, I have the same comment with car insurance, right? If the money that I pay for car insurance every month, if I were to just bank that, then if my car got in a wreck, I would probably have enough saved up to take care of. I mean, probably not the medical bills that might be entailed there, but and I get that. I hear you, and I've had that thought myself. But the reality is, a lot of people don't have those kind of planning skills, right? And you can also say, well,
yeah.
Yeah.
Especially a lot of the people living around the margins of society, they don't necessarily have those opportunities.
Or it's, yeah. I think that is true in some cases, but I think there are also a lot of cases where people say, why would I put $100 a month away toward an emergency fund when I could be paying for my new iPhone or something like that? So, right, there are, like we've kind of demonstrated, there are a lot of cases both directions, for and against welfare programs, that are made well and made poorly by Republicans and Democrats. The reality is, I think in all cases, you're assuming too highly of people, right? Because the left is assuming, oh, people aren't going to take advantage of the system. Come on now. Yeah, they are. And the right's assuming, well, everybody can like take steps in their life to prevent this. And you greatly overestimate the average intelligence of the American individual, right? Like Daniel Tosh has a comedy skit talking about unemployment rates. And he's like, 94% of Americans are employed. And he's like, and we're saying like that's not enough. And he's standing there thinking 94% of you people don't deserve to be employed. And I hear that joke and I'm like, well, I mean, there's some truth there. Like if I think of 94% of all the people I know, I'm like, I wouldn't hire 94% of you.
That's a little high.
That is a little high. I'd maybe hire 75% of all the people I know. Maybe. And that's only if I had some like menial idiot proof jobs that I could fill with some of them. Anyway, that's a tangent.
We gotta go speed round here. So
in case we haven't pissed you off yet.
Let's hit the hot.
Can I say buttons. That? Is that PG?
Yeah. Well, I think at this point we each take an issue. We'll go back and forth a couple of times. We do both sides, and if we need to address the other person's briefly, we can. But we got to keep it to like a minute apiece.
Okay.
You ready?
You
I'm
start.
gonna I got abortion. So on the right, banning abortion is a great thing from our Christian perspective because we believe in the sanctity of the life of those unborn children. On the flip side of that, the Democratic argument that oftentimes we're not doing enough to support moms has a lot of weight. We need to listen to that. Josh, what you got?
This one is more one-sided. Well, it's less one-sided than it used to be, but gay marriage.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if it's really prevalent anymore because it's so unpopular, but the Republicans used to kind of stand for traditional marriage. I think less of them are willing to stick by those guns now. But that's a good thing that we uphold traditional marriage from a law and justice perspective. And this is one of the topics I kind of got to give single-handedly to the right. I think the left maybe does better at saying, hey, we need to treat people who are struggling with this sin like people. But where it stands now, I don't think that's an issue anymore. Well, I shouldn't say that. That's not a mainstream issue anymore. Mm-hmm. But there are some people on the right who are still willing to say like marriage should still only be between a man and a woman. And that's reality. That's what we can confess and teach. So
immigration. We need to care for the strangers, the sojourners, the foreigners in our midst. That's scriptural. If they are amongst the least of these, if they are truly in need of help, it is our duty and responsibility as Christians to care for them. There are a lot of caricatures made about people that are coming to this country that are racist and very unchristian. I think it's possible to uphold a desire to have a strong and organized border while still advocating for, significant changes to our immigration system that allow more people who are truly in need of a safer and, better place to live to get here more easily. So I give the right some credit for wanting an organized and controlled way to know who's here. I give the left a lot of credit for seeing the humanity in people who are desiring to be here. And I certainly think we need to do better. Josh?
I'm going to go with kind of a blanket category, handing money out. Stimulus falls into this. Anything that actually mainly stimulus where they just sent checks to people. I don't really, this I think is less of a theological issue, but it's money is a product like anything else. And if you reduce the scarcity, it's worth less. That's supply and demand. So I think everyone who said, yeah, stimulus is a good idea, which there were people on the right and the left that said that, I appreciated my stimmy checks. I really did. I paid off debt with them. It was great. There's a reason inflation has gotten so bad. You made money worth less because there's more of it. That's just reality, right? So I smack in both sides. You needed to make it look like you were doing something to help people and you messed up. You did something that we shouldn't have done.
I'm going to go with guns because thanks, Josh.
If you're just listening, those were finger guns, not real guns.
Yes. So
in case you were confused by my pew 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 sound.
On the right, we don't all need access to all guns. I don't think that's necessarily true. On the left, I think there's some fair criticisms of the ways that uh, the most convincing, argument I've heard for keeping some firearms is on the protective side. Like if there are bad guys who have access to high powered weapons, at least have good guys with access to high powered weapons. But like, I think the most realistic answer to all of this is there's no such thing as a true good guy with a gun. We're all just sinners with a gun. Like, um, I think limiting the number of high powered weapons that are available is probably the best way to go. But I don't know if there's a strong scriptural answer to all of this that like is completely convincing and satisfying to everyone. So this is one where I think like we just need to have lots of conversations about it and find a genuine middle. Josh?
I'm gonna go with healthcare.
Okay.
This is one I think both parties are underqualified to talk about. This probably applies to a lot of issues, but the reality is politicians are voting on things that they are not experts in, and the people who are informing them, who are whispering in their ear, have agendas, right? One way or the other. So I think in reality, healthcare is one of those areas where I'm like, the government really doesn't have the tools it needs to support this. And I think it's problematic when something like healthcare gets politicized, which is almost inevitable as soon as they start talking about it in Congress. It's a political issue now. So I think this is another one I'm going to smack both sides and just say like, you need to let actual experts deal with this. What that practically looks like, I don't know, and that ship is probably long sailed. But um, yeah, I'm guessing you have something to add on healthcare, or no?
Yeah, I
Are
was
we
just gonna
moving
say there's a
on?
lot like at this point, there's a lot of corporate greed in there. So like the big thing that we should be pushing for, I think as Christians, is just a way to reel in the like money making machine that is the healthcare industry. Not necessarily, knocking doctors for making a lot of money. They go through a lot of education and a lot of long hours to get to where they're at. But like a lot of the medical, like the pharmaceutical companies, the medical or equipment companies, health insurance companies, hospital organizations, like they maybe do a little better than they should. We need to find ways to reel that in. And I mean, when it's a life or death kind of thing like healthcare, I think it's fair to say that there's something wrong there. Where was I going to go next? Oh yeah, the environment. The environment. I'm going to smack both sides again, just because we like doing that. Smacking the right because, like, we as humans can have an impact on our climate. We need to acknowledge that, and we need to do something about it. Smacking the left.
Can I throw something in there?
Hang
Even
on.
more fundamentally than that, we're called to take care of creation.
Also, yes. Smacking the left. Stop being a doomsdayist. It's not that bad yet. Like, yes, we are having an impact, but Florida is not imminently in danger of drowning tomorrow. We have ways that we can do this. Let's sit down at the table and talk.
Don't you challenge Florida man like that. Headline tomorrow: Florida man somehow creates tsunami whirlpool, sucks the entire state down. Blames one podcaster from Michigan.
Yeah. I'll let you go last. This could be our last one.
Oh, I think that might be our last one. I don't know if I have any other hot buttons to touch on.
You sure? I feel like we got to be able to find something.
I I'm just gonna close with a general how politicians treat each other.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Because the rumor is, and I don't know if this is true, obviously, but like a lot of the fighting and the arguments and everything else is for show. They do an interview and they smack each other around a little bit with words, and then they go and they all go to the same bar, right? Show me you guys at the same bar, like be friends, have relationships with each other, that are healthy, and have discussions that are kind. And so this is, again, I gotta smack both sides. Like, be excellent to each other, in the words of Bill and Ted. Like,
Those great philosophers.
just don't be a jerk. Like, stop it. Right and left. Like, y'all be nice to each other. It's kindergartners can manage it for the most part. Why can't you?
Yeah.
So
Takeaways?
My biggest takeaway is I hope that I don't catch any flack for this from anybody. No, that's not. My biggest takeaway is kind of what we started this with. Don't think about yourself as I am a Republican, or I am a Democrat, or I am whatever. You are a baptized child of God. Start there. Mic drop.
It's a good one. And I'm going to back that up with when it comes to politics, like, let's criticize everything. If there
Just be
is,
as negative as possible.
well, yeah, basically. But no, like, if there is a politician that you like more than the other one, whatever the election may be, whatever the circumstances might be, if there is something that your candidate does or that your candidate stands for that is not a solidly, Christian value, criticize it. Be honest about it. Our politicians are incredibly fallible. They're sinful humans like the rest of us. Let's acknowledge that and let's talk about them that way. They are not heroes. They are not superheroes. They are not invincible. Yeah, that's it. Josh?
I just, a couple things with that, because I don't want anyone to take that in a direction different than you meant it. By them being fallible, they're also people that deserve grace.
Yeah.
So treat them with forgiveness and kindness and compassion. Don't go in and break up their dinners.
Yeah.
Right? That's not cool. I wouldn't like it if someone did that to me. Don't do it to them. But also,
you're saying you should love your neighbor as yourself?
Yeah. Keep in mind the eighth commandment, right? Like, it seems a little hard, but if a brother sins against you, you're supposed to go and talk to them about it, not talk about how much of an idiot they are on social media.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, that's kind of both sides of the same coin there.
Yeah.
I'm coming at this from a, like, we hold people on a pedestal and we shouldn't. And Josh is accurately pointing out how my words can say or are able to be flipped. But yeah, when we disagree with someone, we got to be human and kind to them.
Yeah, don't take Ben's words in a spirit different than they were intended.
Yeah.
Prayer requests. Pray for, especially, I hate saying this because we're what, 2 years away from the next presidential election, but it's almost campaign season, y'all. Pray that the country would get less divided, not more. and pray for politicians, pray for the American population, that we would be more gracious than we have been. All these kind of things, just, and pray for wisdom as you're making your political decisions, whatever they are, and pray that the Holy Spirit would keep your identity as a child of God first and foremost in your mind. So,
And if on any of these things you think we're wrong, you think that we might have missed something,
totally possible.
come talk to us. Bring scriptural evidence as to why you think that's the case, but come talk to us.
Yeah. And kind of speaking of that, we do have a Facebook page. It's not really our priority. I think we post exactly once a week, and that's when a new episode comes out. But if you don't know us personally, that's a good place to reach out. You can message us on that page. You can post a comment on that page. And that's if you have a question or a comment or a concern from one of our podcasts, you can do that there. But also, if you have a topic you want us to dive into, let us know. We're happy. We have a pretty long list at this point, and we don't go through it in order. We go down the list and we say, well, which one of these do we want to do today? So if you've given us a hard topic, it might be a while before we actually pick it. Or if you want to come on the show, we welcome any and all to come on the show. And so that's our Facebook page. What's more important is we have a podcast, and you just listen to it, the whole thing. Good for you. We're on all major podcasting platforms. Go ahead and subscribe on your favorite one. By this point, I think we should be on Pandora. By the time this episode releases, we should be released on Pandora. Subscribe. That makes sure that you get a notification when we have a new episode, but also gives us a little bit of validation that people actually want to listen to us, and it's worth the time we put into this. So with all those shameless plugs out of the way, I think we're done for the day. Brothers and sisters, go in peace. Serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God.